Hi, this is Mike at Forte's Parts Connection. We're looking at some bell housings for small block Ford and big block Ford, different combinations. In particular, we're talking about clutch fork and clutch fork angles. This is a big block fork. It's actually an SN95 that they use on big blocks. They also use it on the Coyote and the 4.6 and so forth. This is a small block Ford for all passenger side pivot balls. On this bell housing you can see there's a pivot ball mount right here, and these pivot balls right here are the ones that you have your choices from. You got a short one that's 1.2 inches long. This is about 2 inches long, I believe. 2 inches it is. This one's adjustable and this one's adjustable short. So when you take this bell housing here and you take your pivot ball, I also have a lock washer, which I recommend, or I got a thick washer here that'll make it so you can get you can tune in the proper height of your pivot ball. So I'm just going to put the pivot ball in first, and hopefully it'll screw in without any problems. You'll see how strong I am. It's going good. And when the fork is in place, stick it through the hole, put it on the pivot ball, pop it on. Yeah, come on. Okay, there we are. So that's on here. That's a set position because this is a set mount. The fork then operates in this opening here, from here to here. It should never hit here. It should never hit here. But the operation, the fork will travel from the rear of the car because it's going to push this throw-out bearing forward. It's going to either work with a cable or it can work with a slave. It doesn't matter how it's being operated because it's going to travel forward and disengage the clutch, and the clutch, as it pushes itself back as you engage, it comes back this way. It can't come all the way back here, and it can't be all the way up here. So the positioning of this, and the throw-out bearings on the front of the fork right here, that throw-out bearing, you want to put it up against the back of the pressure plate fingers. So with the clutch fully in place, the throw-out bearing in place against the fingers of the pressure plate, the fork should be about right here. Like I said, can't be back here. As the clutch disc wears over time, the fingers of the pressure plate rise and it'll push the fingers backwards, which will push this rearward. So if you start here and it bottoms out, you can hear it bottom out, it's now disengaging the clutch. So it's critical to start here and go forward. And the pivot point right here, that pivot ball you saw initially, is set in stone with a bolt-in style, or this style's a bolt-in. But no, you can adjust it with a lock washer, which will bring it out the thickness of the washer. And if you need a little bit more, you can actually put a flat washer underneath of it, so it'll bring it out. So that's all part of tuning this. Now if you wanted to, you could put it in there with an adjustable pivot ball. And in that case, you're not using the lock washer. I would use Loctite if you're using this style. And this would, you'd put this in, you get in at the proper height, and then you'd lock it with this nut. You can put a lock washer on there if you want, but I would definitely use thread lock or a red Loctite on here to put it in place. But again, this pivot is critical when you're doing it. So, and if it starts here and you're disengaging, it'll hit the front. That's not good. And if it's in the wrong angle, it actually, the throw-out bearing, instead of gliding forward, front and rear on the bearing retainer, it's actually, because it's an angle, it pushes the bearing against the bearing retainer and loads it and makes it much harder. And many times I've seen people snap their bearing retainer because when it's way forward here, you're side loading the bearing retainer. And when you take a transmission apart, you can see the wear on the bearing retainer from where the bearing's trying to dig in to the retainer. So we replace that, and I don't know if you want to call it tuning the adjustment height, but it is. It's adjusting it to make it proper. If it's not proper, it's wrong, and if it's right, it works fine. I was working on a car not long ago, and the car had the wrong pivot ball height, and it was actually a General Motors car. Similar problem. The pivot ball's on the driver's side instead of the passenger side. Had a short pivot ball. And the problem with that is when you stepped on the clutch, you're stepping on it really hard. And I stepped on the clutch. I said, oh, that's not right. I said, pull the transmission out. He goes, why that? I said, because the pivot ball is probably too short. How do you know that? Because the clutch shouldn't operate like that. So he pulled the transmission out. I said, see this, the fork is at the wrong angle. And when I put it on a lift, I could see the fork was at the wrong angle. Pull the transmission out, pull the fork out, put a different pivot ball in, put it back together, step on the clutch. It's like, oh my God, it's a no other car. So this little pivot ball, which isn't too expensive, 25, 30, depending on the part number. These are closer to 40, but you know, you put it together, it fixes the problem. So the problem can be very obvious, and other times it's not obvious. You think it's it's the wrong slave, it's the wrong geometry. Well, it can be the pivot ball. This big block uses the long fork, and it has the same exact. By the way, if you put this fork in this bell housing, it's wrong, and you put this fork in this one, it's wrong. So choosing the right fork is critical. And if it's the wrong one, it's going to be operating wrong, and it'll have problems. So if you have any questions, please give me a holler. My name's Mike. I'm available, 5 days a week, and available on by email, and I try to return them as often as possible. Give me a holler. Thanks again.